And here we go. Hello and welcome to another YEV in 2026. And joining me is Alex Grant, Kevin Booker, and we're going to be talking about, is an electric vehicle right for you? And going through a few different steps to understand, is it right for you? Because in my opinion, electric vehicles aren't right for everybody. And if I said that they were, then I don't think anyone would believe me. I think I was mad and they might make the wrong decision. But that's what we're going to do today. We're going to find out what's the best way to understand whether electric vehicles are right for you, what steps to take, and then how to choose the right electric vehicle if it is the right thing for you. And we were already having a chat before we went live talking about the ins and outs, because this is a huge subject, but we're going to try and make it nice and simple, nice and balanced, which is what we're all about in YEV. And go from there. So, chaps, as I mentioned before, what I'd like to do is start with a particular category before we get onto costs, because that's obviously the main one here, is the use case. So, we can do a few different scenarios, but I think it's probably easier to say what use case is not right for an electric vehicle for people's everyday use.
I would say the big one, you can do this with an EV, but I would say one big one that's going to get in your way, if you're talking about what you'd actually use the vehicle for, not your kind of home life. So if you're actually talking about vehicle usage, is towing, I think is still quite difficult with an EV. A lot of public charge point, you can massively obviously reduce the range, which you would do in a petrol or diesel car. The issue you tend to have is not a lot of charging points are designed with trailers in mind. So if you're kind of, I'm talking towing all the time. You know, somebody who's kind of towing rather than someone who does it once a year on holiday. But even then, I think you'd probably find it was a bit of a pain if you had a big caravan to kind of unhitch and then go and plug in every so often. I would say tow cars is still a tricky one to fill with EVs. Not impossible, but it's still an issue.
Yeah, no, I think you've absolutely nailed it there. You're absolutely right. It's if you're towing all the time, you think about the extra potential time, because your range is not, a lot of people say it's cut in half. I don't think that's always the case, but it depends on what you're towing, of course, and the vehicle that you're using to tow with. But I think that's a really good start. I think if you are towing a lot, then maybe you want to go into a bit more detail around the types of journeys you're doing, whether there's cheap charging on the way, that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that use case is a good one to start with. I've been struggling with other use cases where an electric vehicle won't work, just from a specific vehicle point of view, not necessarily talking about cost or anything else.
The only other thing is probably those. There's not even you're talking the extreme high mileage kind of couriers where they don't know where they're going, where you've got to do, those kind of rapid deliveries where you're doing hundreds of miles. Just, you could be doing hundreds of miles hour after hour, and you don't. But that's a very niche, again, like towing, a very niche use case.
Like an Amazon drop vans. I mean, I want to try and stay away from fleet here, Kev, but I think it's good to mention that.
Those people who like, gig economy type people who are doing that.
Equally, arguably with that, there's quite a lot of large. Even if you're something like an MG5, and you can pick those up. I say not cheap, but they're getting relatively cheap. You had something like an MG5 and folded the seats down. You've got this is what Cleveland are doing, isn't it, with their servicing stuff? Where if you're willing to sort of fold the seats down and carry your parcels in the back of a car, then you could, I suppose, become a gig economy kind of delivery driver using an EV on those. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're doing the sort of journeys where you're constantly charging at public charging points, even if you can plug in at home every night, then yeah, again, you're going to struggle a little bit to make ends meet with one.
£5,000 for an MG5. There we go.
Is that a long range or a short range? That's really cheap.
That's an £5,000. 52 kilowatt hour battery, 114,000 miles on a 70 plate. So arguably that's 150 miles in winter all day long, potentially, up to 200 in the summer. A real workhorse. Excite, it's not the massive spec, but they come pretty well spec'd anyway. And there's a
Excite
couple
being
of
kind of what they wish that it would do. I really like the MG5, and I'm making fun of it out of a point of affection, but Excite is a bit of a stretch.
There's a long range here, mate, for £7,000. But let's not, red herring and all that.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
I think you just called it the short range version. Is it the short range? They're always standard range, remember? We've got to get that right. There's never a short range version of anything.
Standard range Excite. Standard range Excite basically means short range basic, doesn't it? Let's be honest.
I was thinking the other day about making up a short range sticker for my wife's Tesla because of the amount of battery degradation it's got. Just for a laugh. But yeah, I just couldn't think of the font to use, to be honest. So I just dismissed it. But I think really, other than like you said, the people dropping parcels in the state car, what have you, or towing, I genuinely don't think there's many other use cases unless you're literally constantly driving all the time, which is such a small percentage of people. But I
track
think
cars, I suppose, it's the other one. I mean,
that's
very track cars is pretty niche, but if you wanted to track, I mean, you can do that. You can do that with an EV. But yeah, you're between sessions. I mean, if you're rinsing through battery life as quickly as you are rinsing through a tank of petrol when you're on track, you'd be spending quite a lot of time during your track day charging.
Funnily enough, we were talking about it on the WhatsApp group that I'm on because I was thinking about going to a track day, swapping my winter tires around with my wife's tires because that's the simple fix rather than buying some new tires, and talking about certain tracks have quite small aren't too long in terms of number of miles per lap. You can get more lapped in at certain tracks like Castle Combe and Thruxton, whereas something like Bedford Autodrome, which is my local one, so better for me from I only have to go down the road with a full battery of charged at home, so nice and cheap. They've got quite a long straight, so you end up burning quite a lot of your battery range. But I think we're going off track here. I think
that's really niche.
Well, you probably don't want to go off track though. To get expensive.
Well, this is the good thing about Bedford Autodrome. There's lots of lovely, green runoffs.
I love Bedford Autodrome. It's such a good track.
There we go, Alex. So let's set something up. But I think we've all agreed, other than towing, I think you have to have a real niche use case of vehicle, not to have an EV as a potential. But
the big one is if you can't charge at home.
We'll get on to that.
We'll get onto that. I think, in terms of use case, I think we've agreed. Let's just put a stamp on that. Let's put let's just park that for a second. Literally towing. Other than that, there's lots of little niches. But moving on to the next one, which is kind of cost and charging. But let's start with charging. So, if you've got a driveway at home, then it's kind of a no-brainer, other than the fact that you will need to spend, let's say, £800 to £1,200 on an AC charger, unless you go for a 3-pin plug. But I'd never recommend that to people unless it's just very temporary. But that is like the best scenario point of view. If you've got a driveway, you've got access to charging at home, cheap overnight, it's a no-brainer from a cost point of view. It's just that initial outlay, which a lot of new cars and lease deals have that as part of the deal as well. So I think that's an easy thing to just cover off. Then you get on to the next scenario at home. So if you haven't got a driveway, but you're on housing and your local council has given the green light for like a turbocharged gully type channel to run across under the pathway, so you can feed your charger lead underneath and plug into your car, which is parked outside your house. If you can park outside your house, that's the next kind of positive scenario. I think the costs, guys, you might know better than me, but I'm pretty sure the cost of one of those gullies is about £1,000. I don't think it's any more than that.
Worth noting as well that there are some incentives for home charging, particularly. I mean, if you're a company car driver, your employer can pay for you to have a charging point at home. There are a lot of companies are kind of going down the route of kind of getting their entire company car schemes onto either plug-in hybrid or electric. You can have that paid for by your employer, and there's no tax charge associated with that. So you don't pay benefit in kind on it. The other thing that's worth bearing in mind is that you can still get plug-in grants depending on your circumstances. So if you live in a block of flats and you have your own parking space, you can get a government grant towards the charging point. You can also get that if you're parking on street, but there are some caveats with that in terms of it doesn't guarantee the adjacent space, and it depends on local councils in terms of whether you're allowed trail cables. So there is support there, but you kind of have to have certain things in place for the on-street stuff to claim the grant. But yes, there is grant funding available for certain circumstances.
And good to hear that Gracie enjoyed the EV charge event that we had, the quiz. If you've not watched the quiz, go back and watch it. We had loads of fun. I probably drank too much, as you probably tell. I couldn't even speak in most of the points. Monster truck, yeah, that's a potential niche. I think you'd agree, Lewis. The biggest problem seems to be charging solely in public, which we will get to. And what we'll do is everyone that's watching live we'll ask anything that we've missed, because that's what I wanted to clear up, just to make sure we haven't missed anything for any of the Chargehead YEV members, to see to make sure that we're on point. So I've talked about at home driveway. I've talked about gully charging. I would move on normally to a local AC charger CPO, which is close to your house. But before I do that, I'll say charging at work. So workplace charging, it might be free. I've heard of people, companies doing it for free. I've heard of companies doing it 25p, 35p at cost. Generally speaking, if your work is doing charging at your workplace, it tends to be pretty good value, and it kind of makes sense because your vehicle's there for a long period of time. You don't have to go and you don't have to go to a charger. There's no downtime, so to speak. Have you guys got any experiences with cost per kilowatt hour on charging?
Well, the cost of energy has gone up in general. So, I mean, employers are less and less likely to be offering this for free because their energy costs are higher. Quite often you get that you're more likely to get discounted rates for this to help you if you haven't got off-street parking at home. So whether you've got kind of companies that are going big on sustainability and getting all their company car drivers and their van drivers into electric vehicles, you'll generally find that they then offer, you'll increasingly often find that they will offer some kind of discounted charging, so that there's not they're not pushing people into vehicles that aren't saving them any money. If your employer is lucky enough to offer free charging, you can also carpool. So you don't actually have to own an EV to benefit from free workplace charging. So your employer can say, if you're getting a lift in with somebody who works for another company, that person can charge their car for free at your workplace without there being any tax charge, and so can you. So if you're giving them a lift and you're charging at your workplace, you can get free charging. There's no tax charge for it. If you're friends with somebody who works like 2 or 3 doors down, they can pull into your employer's parking area with your employer's permission, obviously, and they can plug in. And again, they get the same benefits, even though they don't work for the company that you do. So there's some pretty good kind of this system set up for that sort of thing.
No, it's nice. I mean, go on, Kev.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff, like, when we've looked at it, we look at doing it at what it costs us for the electricity. So we can't, it's the same with, you'll find a lot of public sectors, you can't give electricity away for free. So you just give it at what it costs you. So you want people to drive green cars. I mean, unfortunately, business energy rates aren't necessarily as cheap as home energy rates. So, you might find they're a bit higher cost than charging at home, but it's still well below that sort of 50 pence per kilowatt hour that seems to be the break-even point.
About 40p seems to be the thing that I've seen thrown around in terms of when fleets are looking at sharing. I know we're talking about fleets and we're trying not to, but generally speaking, 40p seems to be about the rate where it covers their costs and a bit more, and enables them to offer a lower than public charging rate. So there's a reason for doing it.
And we'll get to the costs per mile in a second, petrol versus electric. We could talk about diesel as well. But before I do that, so just as a bit of a summary, so we've talked about cost of charging, home, driveway, big tick, outlay of the charger, of course, home with the gully, cost of charger, cost of the gully. I see that as being a tick, because over a certain amount of time, you're certainly going to save money. And then we've got work charging, which generally speaking, if it's 40p or less, I think that's going to be a massive tick when we talk about the figures in a second. Then the next two is where it starts to get a little bit sticky. So you've got local AC CPO. So let's say your car goes home at night, but you need to park it up the road where you might have an AC charger. That might be a lamppost charger. It might be like near me, I've got a Believe charger, which is 55p. So the rates are kind of all over the place. And it's a bit of a potluck to whether you're in an area where you can benefit from, I'm not going to say cheap charging at a price that's going to make it more cost effective compared to a petrol or diesel car. So, and this is where you need to really do the homework before you take the plunge. And this is why I wanted to go through this with everybody. So then you've got the other option, which is your DC charging from a CPO. And again, that's all over the place as well, because at one side of the scale, you've got Tesla off-peak rate, which could be 22p, or on-peak rate, which is about 42p. Again, it changes depending on where you are. And then you've got all the other CPOs, which could be anything from 50p up to £1. So again, it depends on, in effect, in a way, what car you've got. Also, again, where you live. So again, doing that due diligence prior by maybe getting a ZapMap app to understand what chargers are close to you. But sometimes that's not good enough, because there are actually chargers out there that come outside of ZapMap. So chaps, do you know of any other apps that might be good for understanding what would be cheap charging nearby? Maybe Co-Charger, is that one as well?
I mean,
Co-Charger is shared, isn't it? It's shared. So if you live somewhere where lots of people have off-street parking and charging, there are people who are now sharing their charging points. So adding to that public network.
The thing I've found as well is actually, this is where, you do need to do your research, is ZapMap is good at telling you the general price of a charger. But like, for example, if you're an Instavolt member, you get access to off-peak charging of 60 pence. If you use your Electroverse cars, you get a discount, but it's not the same discount as if you have the Instavolt app. So it's things like that. So that's where I think you still need to look at, look on ZapMap to find the CPOs in your area, and then go to the individual CPOs web pages and look if there's any deals for that. Like, if you're close to an Ionity can go quite low price with a membership. Is it worth the membership if that's going to be your main charger? The same as even GridServe offer membership now, which gives you discounted rates. So the memberships are kind of coming back. They kind of went away when everything went contactless, but now they're trying to encourage you to kind of be loyal to a brand of CPO, as it were. So they're kind of instilling that loyalty with different apps and different membership schemes to give you quite significant discounts.
I would add into this as well, if you are depending on DC chargers, or you don't have a home charger and you want to kind of top up quickly, it's worth looking to see if there's any open Tesla superchargers nearby, because they tend to be very good price wise throughout the day. Actually, they're usually cheaper than any other network. We have one near us, and you can just, I go there with other stuff. I don't have membership for it. It's still much cheaper than any of the other DC charging networks nearby. So it's worth looking into.
I thought you had to have membership. Don't you have to pay £10 a month to get it? And you don't. So you just need the app, and then you pay.
You just need
10
the app.
pence, and
you don't even need the
10
app. You can actually just use it pay as you go on because it falls under the public charging regulation. So I don't know if all of them have it, but well, they should. Yeah, if any open Tesla chargers which allow access for other for people who non-Tesla drivers, because obviously Tesla vehicles, you just plug them in and they just work. They just start the charge session, but they've actually got chip and pin, not chip and pin, contactless things, and they do it through the app. I've got the app. I don't pay membership, and for example, at Reading Services, I think in peak times there, it's something like 56p per kilowatt. It's not expensive at all, and it's much cheaper than that.
But is that a V4 charger, or is that one of the older ones where you're using the app?
V4 have contactless. I don't know if the older
V2,
ones do.
V3 don't.
They would have to have it now. Any open public, any Tesla chargers that are open to beyond Tesla would have to have it, and by law now as a DC charger.
I think they may have skipped that one on the V4s because they'll say they're legacy hardware. Because I know the ones in Cardiff haven't got the screen to tap your card on.
No,
they're not supposed to. But it's a burden for Tesla to add all of this stuff.
V4s have the screens, but Yeah,
But
I
they
mean,
should
and the
accept
other
contactless. Actually,
yeah,
no, I think the ones in Cardiff have got a unit at the end of the row. There is right on the end. There's a contactless reader that does a lot of them.
I've only ever plugged them in.
Oh,
So-
maybe I'll call out to the chat if anybody knows on that. While I just go through some of the comments in here. At some point soon, buying a HK. I'm not sure what that means. Do you mean Hong Kong? Because I'd really like to have it back off the Chinese. What about Commando Socket?
Wow, we're going to start wars and confrontations on here as well as.
Sorry, it's my
what's
bad
going on
humour.
in the world at the moment.
What about Commando Socket at home? I don't think that's particularly safe. And Commando Socket, I suppose you could have it.
Yeah,
That way.
16 amps, so 3 kilowatts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not particularly.
You can
quick,
do
is it?
you can do higher than that. It depends on
Oh
what
yeah,
you've
I
got.
suppose you could do 32 off it.
Well, you've got
16
three
amps as well.
phase. You've got 64. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, you can do quite a lot with three phase with Commando sockets, but
Yeah, that's the red commando socket, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but you can do both. I've got a juice booster,
booster.
which is a cable where I can swap the ends around. So I've got blue and red, C-form socket ends on that. You can do up to 22 kilowatts through that, which is quite useful. But I don't have three phase, so it's not that much use to me.
Mark, I'm not sure if we're going to come back to this, but slightly off topic. How long before buying or selling a home without the ability to home charge is going to be like having no internet access? My son has just done this. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'm sure it won't be too long. Ionity, they have a hub at a village hotel near me at £88 a year and 43 pence. It's reasonable, especially if you're using the gym there once a week. Another fan of the Ionity Village hotel tie-up. All my way from home charging bar one last year was Ionity, including in Europe. That's interesting. V3 are closed before they're open.
Yeah, superchargers. So V4 are open and contactless. V3 are closed.
Yeah, I thought that was the case.
You probably know better than I would, based on the ones. I think the ones at Reading have all got the screens on.
Yeah, they're V4s. The ones in Cardiff are V3s.
The ones in Cardiff, just as you come in on the end, there's a little pedestal with a screen on it and a contactless reader, which I spotted last time. I did it through the app because the app's better, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean the other thing, which when we're on the subject of public charging and rapid charging, is we probably do need to address the elephant in the room. Is make sure that you've got a plan B, because people do have a habit of vandalizing chargers. It's still out there, we can't ignore that it's not happening. And what you don't want to do is rely on, you've got, say, a bank of Ionities and no plan B that's anywhere close. So, in the interest of balance, make sure you've got some alternatives as well as just one particular rapid charger around there, because you don't want to be stuck if, there's nothing else for like 20 miles and you were relying on one that was 4 miles up the road.
It's quite interesting, actually. I saw some research recently about this, and there was a piece in that about how there was a growing preference in the US and Europe for by a company called Gilbarco, and they've got they were saying that there's a kind of a preference towards going to sites with more than one charging point. And to me, that's something I tend to do is I will tend to go, how many chargers are on site? Whereas if this is like one somewhere, I tend to kind of go, I'll skip to the next one where there's 8, because that way you can guarantee that if you turn up at the one that's got one, that someone's dropped the charging point in a muddy puddle or something and just left it there and it's full of grit and it won't work properly, or the screen or the little contactless reader won't be working properly. If you've got backup plans on site, that's the best place to go to if you can. The advantage is now, I remember doing this in the early days, the advantage is now that a plan B is never that far away. Or rarely that far, unless you're out in the middle of nowhere in Scotland or something, or the middle of Wales. You've usually got another charger not that far away from you anyway. It's just a bit of a pain in the bum if you've got to go off piste to go and find it.
No, I think the other thing is to look at the brands of chargers. And some are more reliable than others. So I'd check some stats first. Not going to name and shame them here, but you want to check. We want to check the stats of their uptime, and don't go and buy an EV without actually going to the chargers. Pay them a visit.
Yeah.
Let's do the opposite of this then. If you've got your kind of top 3, what 3 networks would you go for by choice? If you were going to charge somewhere, where would you aim for? What tends to deliver a good, reliable charge?
So the fastest ones I tend to go to seem to be Ionity. Ionity seem to be the high current rate ones. They work really well with Electroverse. Contactless, sometimes they've got the shared pedestal, which is not ideal. So if you've got like an Electroverse card, that's fine. I mean, grid serves, they're everywhere. They're going to work. You've got your Instavolts as well. They'd be my kind of go-to. MFG is another good network. They'd be my top kind of 4 networks that I'd say I've always been to, and they always seem to work. I mean, the problem I've found with Instavolt is some of the McDonald's, they've put them in a really busy McDonald's sites. So there's not enough spaces for the customers eating their burgers. So you tend to get other cars parked in there.
For me, I'd say GridServe would always be they're not the cheapest, but the infrastructure is always really good with GridServe. They're almost always hooked up to a good supply. You tend to get good solid charging speeds out of them, and they tend to work. I think I've had issues over the years, little niggly issues with quite a few of the charging networks. Instavolt stuff tends to be pretty reliable as well, I would say. And yeah, the MFG stuff's really good too, isn't it? So
yeah, but MFG has really come from the first time I used an MFG station was when we did the first Guinness World Record. They just opened a new EV power hub, but they've seemed to have gone from strength to strength, rolling out big sites you don't tend to see an MFG site with like one charger. There's like 5 minimum on all of the ones I've seen so far.
Well, that would be my thing. Is my plan A would always be a site with numerous chargers, at least kind of 3 or 4 chargers on site. I just think that's that way you've always got a plan B, haven't you? So
I could probably count on one hand how many times I've used a non-Tesla charger.
Yeah, all right, but that's a slightly. I mean, yeah,
so
Tesla's the other one.
I don't really count because I don't have a proper EV. According to Neil from Power, yeah, you don't have a proper EV. You've got a Tesla. But fortunately, BP have just put in a very quick one. Although I haven't had like massively quick speed from them, but it did work close by. But other than that, I used to occasionally use an Osprey one because it was Chem Power chargers, and I think they're really reliable. That's at the Brew Point in Bedford, and it's great. They do amazing beer. But other than that, yeah, I can't really give people my opinion on that because
actually, I've just seen a comment from Dean. They should bring that, but is the Sainsbury's network. But the one caveat I'll put on that is be careful with that one because lots of the car parks haven't updated their operating hours. So basically, some of them, if the store is shut, you get 10 minutes and it's all AMPR.
Oh, really?
So be careful on that because I've found heard of a lot of people who've gone in rapid charge because the car park's open, but then they've been there out of hours for more than 10 minutes and they've been stung with a penalty charge.
Well, that's really. I tell you what, I'm glad we did talk about that because I think it's all relevant for people starting to think about electric vehicles. And this particular podcast isn't necessarily for people that have already got an electric vehicle. It's really the people that are on now that do have an electric vehicle be really interested to know what we have missed, which I mentioned earlier. But I think this is really to be shared with a lot of people to understand what the pitfalls are, to understand, the process to go through. But the reason I wanted to talk about charging all the different types was also just to move on then to the cost per mile, because Alex, I know he's probably good in this area, but from a petrol car point of view, cost per mile tends to be something like 16 pence to 22 pence. And this is all very rough, and it all depends on the type of electric car you're buying. Hence why there's a difference of 16p to 22p on a petrol vehicle. But generally speaking, I would say a rule of thumb is an electric vehicle will do 3 miles per kilowatt hour. Per kilowatt.
3 to 4, yeah.
I would say 3 is kind of a bit of a standard because you've got to take into consideration winter.
The charging loss as well. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. So I've worked out that if you can get a cost per kilowatt from any charger of 50p or less, you're going to be thereabouts or cheaper than a petrol equivalent car. Okay. So if you're looking at charging out and about, if your focus is to save money, that is the cost you should be looking at. Is it costing less than 50p? Guys, do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that also tallies with, so just for reference, the current flat rate through Ofgem, if you're on a price capped, like just a standard tariff, is about 25 or 26p. We are on one of those here. We're doing it completely the wrong way, and we're still halved our cost compared to petrol, per mile cost compared to petrol. And that's charging whenever we want, no off-peak tariff, no fancy EV tariff or anything. That is just a completely bog standard, variable tariff set on the Ofgem kind of per quarter rates. So, and we've halved our fuel cost compared to our old petrol car, or compared to the Polo. Yeah.
I mean, I get upset with myself when I charge at 26 pence, which is not off peak.
That's about what we're paying. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, because I pay on, and just rattle just two of them off. I think Octopus, everyone really knows that one. It's, was it around 12ish till about 6 in the morning? There's 6 hours there. It's about 7 pence, nice and cheap. I'm on Eon Drive, which is 12 till 7, which is 6.7 pence. But don't just focus on the off-peak rate. Look at your standing charge and look at your on-peak rate as well to marry it all up. So that's what I would always start with: use case, cost, where you're charging it, how much is it costing you? You know, what's the efficiency of your electric car? Are you going to go for the brand? Are you going to go for an Audi e-tron, which has got miles per kilowatt of efficiency of 2 miles per kilowatt? You need to be taking that into account. Or you're going to buy a Honda Ioniq Wind Knife, which does 4 miles per kilowatt in its stride easily, even in the winter.
But also needs a lot of public charging if you're a high mileage driver.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
You run out of that range because of the size of the battery. So,
and we'll get to what is, we might not even get to this on this particular chat. We might have to say it for next time, but not only is EV right for you, but how to decide and choose the right electric car as well, because there are so many different ones out there. So we've tackled the use case, we've tackled the cost and charging. Now let's talk about the capital outlay. Now, we did mention earlier about you've got to think about the cost of a charger. So if you're charging at home, whether you've got a driveway or you've got to outlay the cost of a charger for the driveway, or the cost of the charger and the gully if you've got a terraced house and you're thinking about doing that, and there are grants available. But also, what about the outlay of, okay, you're looking at, and I'd rather generalize it, the most popular car these days tends to be an SUV, right? And most people, I would say, going for automatic these days. They're not massively high mileage users, so petrol. So I've done a bit of an example here of an outlay of looking at a petrol auto SUV versus an electric SUV. And there's so many different comparisons you could do here, but I just thought that was kind of a fairly normal, easy one to do. So what I did is I went onto Auto Trader and I looked for a petrol automatic SUV 60 miles away from myself, my location, less than 30,000 miles, automatic, 1.6 petrol to 2 litre petrol. And I looked up to 5 years old and popped it in the search and said, what is the cheapest of that comparison? And the cheapest car that came up was I'll do the cheapest two, was a Mazda CX-30 petrol auto, done 22,000 miles on a 2021 plate at £16,000. The next cheapest was a Kia Sportage, done 25,000 miles on a 2021 plate, and that was 16,400. Then I did exactly the same thing for an electric car, and I nearly fell over. I didn't think it was going to be quite as different. Now, bearing in mind Mazda and Kia, I wouldn't be against buying one of those vehicles. What about you, chaps? Are you quite confident in that brand reliability and
fairly standard cars?
Yeah, I mean, I'd prefer to go for something like that rather than like a Ford, a Vauxhall, or a French car myself, because Japanese or Korean, they tend to be more reliable. But that's my opinion. I know Alex and Kevin are slightly different Vauxhall fans. So and then I did it for electric, and the cheapest one that came up, admittedly, it was an MG, but you can get an MG ZS 44 kilowatt hour battery, which arguably is about 150 mile range, 17,000 miles on a 2021 70 plate. It was £9,000. So So if people, again, and I promote this all the time, but when people, generally speaking, people look at the age and they look at the mileage and they'll look at the brand, right? I think those are the three key ones. But my personal opinion is with electric, as long as it has been serviced, if it does need servicing, unlike Tesla that just needs checkups, just make sure the gearbox oil has been changed. If it has got a gearbox in the electric vehicle and the cooling and all the rest of it to manufacturer standards, then an electric vehicle tends to be more reliable at higher mileage. But such a change. I mean, if you're not too brand snobby, I mean, there's a £7,000 saving there. And even if you take £1,000 off for the charger, you know, that's a huge saving. And then you can start saving on the running costs as well. Not only the cost per mile, if depending on the scenarios that we talked about before, but also on the servicing and the tires, depending on how you drive. So I see, you know, in that particular example, if you're not too bothered about going for an MG, not too much, you know, not too specific on the brands, then there's a massive saving there. But if you are, the next up from there, because I completely dismissed the Mazda MX-30 because the range is, excuse my French, piss poor. Then the DS crossover, again, I wouldn't really buy one of those, so I don't think they're particularly reliable. E2008 and Mocha, not my cup of tea, but I know that Alex and Kevin might be looking at those. So the next one I looked at was the Kia Niro, and I found one of those with 27,500 miles on a 2020 70 plate for £14,000. So a little bit older, similar sort of miles, but it was still £2,000 less expensive than the petrol. And the range on that car is going to be 200 miles plus because it was 64 kilowatt hour battery.
Yeah, that'll be easy. Well, easily best part of 250, even if the battery's actually had an absolute hammering on it. That would be my. I would go for that. I'd pay the extra for that over the MG and just kind of have the extra usability. It's a no-brainer.
I mean, I don't know what the Mocha and the E2008 are like, but they were a lot cheaper than the Kia, and you can get
the DS, the Mocha, and the 2008 are all basically the same.
Yeah, because they're all Stellantis, aren't they?
Yeah,
and the older ones did suffer more with cold weather than the newer ones. Very
efficient. Yeah, the older motor, the whole older 136 horsepower motor is significantly less efficient than the new 156 horsepower one that they've got in it. Interesting as well, though, the older ones, the Mocha I know from launch used to have a heat pump as standard, and the new ones don't. That's one they've taken out. So they fit a bigger battery, but they've got rid of this standard heat pump. You have to pay a few £100 to have that added on. So,
well, you could get a Hyundai Kona on a 72 plate with 20,000 miles on it for 15,400. So still be able to easily get a charger in there, and you'd have a newer vehicle by 3 plates with a similar mileage. And a Hyundai Kona's a great car.
It is. We were talking about this yesterday, weren't we? We were saying slightly slow charging, but you get such a long range on it that actually it's not the end of the world. It charges quickly enough. Again, with that, you kind of have to view it like Gray's charging, don't you? Where you just like, oh, well, I've reached the point where I'm like, I don't know, 200 miles into a journey. I mean, 200 miles is, even if you're a fairly sturdy of bladder, is quite a long time to be sat behind the wheel in the UK.
And actually,
and by that point, you might want to stop for half an hour anyway, and you wouldn't be anywhere near the bottom of the charge by that point.
And did you say it was a 72 plate?
Yeah.
So it's the facelift one, and the
I don't think it was the facelift. It wasn't sorry, it was the facelift one. Yeah, so 2021 and newer. Yeah.
So the interesting thing to note with that is that got 11 kilowatt hour 3-phase charging capability as standard. So that's quite handy.
Yeah.
I mean, and actually, when we're talking about used cars and stuff, in the interest of balance, this is where we're comparing like for like. Petrol, diesel. You'll get someone who'll come on comments maybe and criticize after. You can't compare Bangonomics to what we're talking about. We're talking about people who want a 3 to 4 year old car, which has got low mileage and stuff. These are not people who are going to go out and spend £1,000 on like a Volvo V50 and just throw it away. So this is where it's important to compare. Lots of the comparisons I see online are people comparing an old £1,000 car to either a new EV or a used EV, and that's not a fair comparison.
In the interest of balance, that is the only thing that's missing really from the EV market at the moment. Is you can go out and buy £1,000-mile, £1,000 worth of Ford Mondeo that will go up and down the country on a tank of diesel that will cost buttons to run. I mean, it's going to be fairly knackered by that point, but at the same time, everything for it is cheap. You can't yet go out and buy something like a Model 3 for £1,000 that will do everything you want all in one go. You can go out and buy quite cheap things like Leafs and early Zoes and stuff, but they're still the really cheap end of the EV market is still very much a second car, whereas you can go out and buy for a few £100 a very capable petrol or diesel family car if you're prepared to live with something that's got a few knocks and bangs going on with it. That's the only gap in the market really at the moment, I think, is that yes, that Bangonomics market for EVs doesn't exist yet. It will, but they're not old enough yet to kind of get into that category, are they?
I think
do you think it will exist though? Because obviously the batteries will have more value than an ICE vehicle's engine necessarily would have had. So are you going to get, will you get £1,000 EVs? I don't know.
Yes, you will. I guarantee. No, you will eventually. It's just that's a mature market thing, and the cutoff really is like 2017, unless you're talking about old Model S's and stuff like that. The cutoff is 2017, where you started to get Bangonomics friendly kind of, your Neros and your Konas and stuff, and those are the kind of vehicles that people will be buying in the same way that people might buy an old diesel Focus at them or Astra or something at the moment. Is that when those vehicles get older and older and older, there will still be a market for those, because people, fine, the battery might be worth more in parts, but generally speaking, if you bought £1,000 worth of Mondeo, you could probably break that for more money than it's worth as a whole vehicle as well. You can make that argument for other vehicles. I think there will be a Bangonomics market eventually for EVs, and they'll be fine when they reach that age.
I think you can get a perfectly usable first car electric car for £5-6 grand now. I really do. Whereas I don't think that was the case before. I think it was more like £7-8 grand. So it is starting to come down, but it'd be interesting to see what happens in the near future as cars come down, like more electric cars hit the market, to see what happens there. But I thought that was just an interesting example. Bearing in mind, that's only 60 miles away from me. I could have gone further afield, but I wanted to make it as realistic as possible to a lot of scenarios. And I think in that particular example, you can see that actually electric is actually cheaper as a capital outlay in most cases, depending on how specific you are. Again, then you can start talking about color and all those other things that are important to, I'm not going to say it, to other people. So then there is the other cost to think about is obviously servicing and maintenance, which we've already mentioned. Tax and insurance. I did a video about insurance on a really cheap electric vehicle versus a really cheap diesel auto, and there's nothing in it. That was a Nissan Leaf versus a Skoda Octavia diesel auto, and there was literally nothing in it for the insurance. Tax, arguably, if you're depending on the electric car you're looking at, if it's pre-2017, it's going to be nice and cheap. If it's going to be after that, it's going to be about the same as any petrol diesel car, realistically, on average. But talking about what I also wanted to talk about was, yes, there's the capital outlay of the electric and the petrol, but how do you purchase it? So obviously, we're not talking about new cars here. We're talking about used, because in my opinion, January is a great time for used car buying. Everyone's finished Christmas. They're thinking about a new car. I always think the market's quite buoyant. Thinking about maybe March, the brand new plate, which I think Kevin was mentioning earlier. But talking about, how do you finance it? Do you go down the bank loan route? Do you go down PCP? Do you go HP or bank loan? And I think maybe we should just use that example again on that, on the SUV, under 30,000 miles, under 5 years old. How, if you didn't have the money in the bank, which most people don't these days, how would you finance it, chaps? How would you do it? What do you think is the best way of doing it?
See, I'd always be wary about a bank loan, because I think car finance has more protection on it around the car itself. Whereas if you just went and borrowed a couple of K from the bank and bought a car and that car died next week, I think car finance has a bit more protection on it. But, that's so I'd always try and do it. Make sure you've read all the small print. Like anything in life, read the small print.
Yeah.
I mean, because the other thing which is growing with cars now, used cars, is PCP. You get PCP deals on used cars. You never used to basically your only option on a used car used to be old-fashioned hire purchase. but now you've got that, and there's some. I've noticed now some leasing companies are starting to look at leasing second life cars, so you can lease a used car for some very competitive pricing.
Well,
It's interesting. That's growing quickly.
I was going to say, Alex, you'll probably stop me on this one. You'll probably stop me on this one being wrong, but I'm pretty sure Ford came up with PCP originally, and they called it options, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, options for.
And Mercedes was early on it as well with the 190. I mean, PCP. The issue with PCP is you're funding what the vehicle loses over the time that you have it. So obviously, the good thing from a used perspective is that it's a very affordable way, because if you can get a car that's done the bulk of its depreciation already, one that's 2 to 3 years old, you're funding it when the curve has kind of slowed down in terms of depreciation. So your monthly payments could be significantly lower than buying a new vehicle, because you're not funding the whole amount of it. Makes a big difference to the affordability of kind of new-ish vehicles, which is kind of really where the sweet spot is with the with EVs, isn't it? It's the kind of the last 3 or 4 years, particularly of EVs, are the where you start to get very easy, single car family type vehicles.
Yeah, obviously with the PCP, you've got the guaranteed minimum future value. So if the car's not worth what they say it might be at the end, then you can just give it back and not suffer any negative equity. There's lots of ins and outs. We're not finance professionals here. We're not giving advice on finance. I'll just put that caveat in there. But there's lots of options out there. But bear in mind, there's different APR interest rates as well to consider when looking at it.
And the other thing as well is, with PCP, is people need to be aware that if you put a big deposit on a PCP, you could lose that. If your car goes down in value, so don't expect, never ever go into it thinking you're going to get a big chunk out back at the end towards your new car.
Always, you might. We have every time we've traded it in, we have. But yes, that doesn't mean that you won't. That's guaranteed.
Yeah, it's definitely not. That's definitely not guaranteed. And then it's a question of, okay, if you are looking to finance the vehicle on a monthly amount, maybe you should have a look at a new electric car on a lease. And have a look at the PCH, personal lease, or any of the other options that are out there. So this is at the point where, when you're talking about costs and looking at your options, to coin a phrase again, and like I said before, a lot of the new electric car deals tend to have potential chargers thrown in as well. I know that I think it's a Moda are doing things like that, and Geely with Anson chargers, I think, which is one that Kev's got. So it's best to not just focus yourself on used at that point. Maybe look at new as well. Don't take anything off the table at that stage.
Because you can find there's much more favourable interest rates on a new one, because a 100%. Manufacturer is subsidising that to make it cheaper.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm pretty sure that I've covered everything there. Before we talk about the ID Polo, which I looked at a video recently, is there anything that people think that we have missed going through everything there, in terms of the use case, costs, charging costs, the capital outlay, the insurance cost, tax, thinking about financing it? Is there anything that people who are watching right now think that we have missed? And again, if you watch the video after the live, whack it in the comments if you think that we've missed anything out there. Really interested to know, to make sure that we've got something that's absolutely solid. And I'm probably going to do a full video on it for the main channel, just to try and help people into the new year. ID Polo. Alex, you are the VW expert here. Have you seen it? Detail?
I've seen it. Was the bit that caught my attention was the fact you can put retro dials on it.
Yeah,
well, everyone's kind of credited it with being Mark II Golf, but actually it's the same as the Mark II Polo dials, which is used the same font. That was not the same as the Eurostyle font that I get in mine. But what? Sorry, go on.
I said that was the only thing that I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. But
I think it looks more Volkswagen-y than most of the ID stuff that's come out so far. I think they're getting back to kind of, they've realised that they kind of missed the mark a little bit for a while, and they're kind of getting back to offering a bit more of it. I'm interested in the GTI, obviously. Could be a kind of an electric equivalent of the G40. So that's quite,
But how fast does it need to be?
Doesn't need to be that fast. GTI shouldn't be that fast.
No.
Seriously, they don't need to be that quick.
What do they have to have? What would an electric Polo GTI have to go? Take my money for you, Alex.
Retro dials, naturally.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
sold.
sold.
Yeah, straight away. I mean, visually, they're kind of doing all the kind of the right homage stuff, right? You know, in terms of red pinstripes and the tartan fabric and all the other bits and pieces. I think it looks like a Volkswagen GTI again. A proper Volkswagen GTI should be a car that you could use every day, but that puts a smile on your face when you do want to take the kind of the long route home. If I'm being brutally honest, Volkswagen doesn't tend to get hot Polos right. They tend to get the Golf GTIs really right, and they tend to get the
Lupo GTI was good.
The Lupo GTI was very good, but the equivalent Polo GTI wasn't as well done as the Lupo.
I remember driving one of those when it because I had a Mark IV Polo at the time, and I saw the Mark V come out, and I grabbed one, and I decided to do a VMAX on the Bedford bypass.
Because
you got six gears in the Lupo, and you only got 5 in the Polo. So the Polo got the Polo gearbox, and the Lupo got the Golf gearbox. And the Lupo had all sorts of trick stuff like aluminium wings and all sorts of other bits and pieces on it. It was really cool.
You could spec it really highly because my sister-in-law had one back in the day, and it had like, you know, you could spec it with Xeon headlights back then and things like it. It was what in the old days you had a cassette and a CD player in it. You had
that
both.
Ridiculous era of Volkswagen doing absolutely
massive, huge stereos,
cars. Yeah, but yeah, I would say I'll be interested to see what it's like. I think this kind of I don't think it needs to have like 800 horsepower or anything like that. It has to have. I think think of it as being a Volkswagen version of like the Alpine A290, where it hasn't got masses and masses and masses of power, but it's just got that kind of. There's a lot of it in the sort of chassis tuning and other bits and pieces, and just that kind of grin factor in terms of enjoying the power that it has, rather than feeling like it needs to like press you back into the seat.
See, the only car
that's where the art stuff comes in, isn't it? So
I completely forgot, but I did drive the new Mini Cooper Works electric car.
Yeah.
That blew me away. That I don't know if anyone's watched. I did a video about it, and I really enjoyed driving that vehicle. If you've not seen that video, go and check it out. And if you've not driven one, go and drive one, because it's the only electric car that's not actually that quick that I drove, and I was actually really impressed. So maybe
the Aceman's fun too. The Aceman John Cooper Works is really good. The only thing I would say that I criticise on that is, and BMW does the same thing, is that I like paddles on the back of the wheel, so you can kind of up the regen with the left paddle and wind it off again with the right paddle, because it kind of feels like shifting up and down through gears. It just gives you that little bit of kind of interactivity in terms of the driving experience. Mini has one paddle and it's on the right-hand side, and it activates the boost function. And to me, it feels like it's on the wrong side of the steering wheel, and it's the wrong way of triggering that. I would rather have a button on the steering wheel or something. So if you press realistically, if you're going to go faster, muscle memory for me, I would do it with my left hand. You know, blip it on the left hand side of the just feels wrong in the wrong place. Other than that, cracking car, terrible ride quality, but hilarious fun.
Now, see, this is where I have to make a confession. I have never driven any of the electric Minis. I have So if anyone from Mini is watching or listening, I will quite happily review some Minis, because I'd like to try them. I mean, the last Mini I drove was like a 1980s one, so I'm assuming they've changed significantly since then. I'm assuming that the brakes work much better for a start, like at all. So
I was really impressed. I was really impressed with both the Minis, actually. I didn't turn the traction control off on the original one because I didn't know how to, but both of them really impressive. But yeah, go check out my video, Kev. You get a bit of detail in there. Just to cover some of the comments here, J500 Ant, chosen for its almost guaranteed 250 mile range, even in the winter, because I do have a few of those days a month. Because you were talking about your Kia EV6, which he loves. Yeah, absolutely. If you've got decent range and you can get paid per mile for work, quids in, absolutely. I do something very similar in mine.
This is where the Kona punches above its weight. The fact that that's literally a 250 mile range all year round car with only a 64 kilowatt hour battery pack.
They are ridiculous. They are ridiculously capable vehicles.
Unless there's a massive battery gate issue and it's not really a 64 kilowatt hour. They're giving you 100 kilowatt hours. They just haven't told you.
Yeah, I don't think I'm getting much more than just over 200 miles in the Tesla at the moment. Need to sort out those winter tires, although they've been very useful the last couple of days. It's been blooming freezing, lots of grip, which is good. I had to jump on this one. Mark Cornwell's just put in, if you're not close to a good Hevra network garage, used cheaper EVs are going to be expensive to repair. Really need more options beyond the dealer. Now, I'm just going to give you my experience from Hevra. I think it's great that there's Hevra dealers that are, if you put it into their website, you can find your local dealer and they're more experienced in EV stuff. But both of my local ones, you could argue 3 of my most local ones have actually let me down quite a lot. I hope to be changing that mind frame, because I've always promoted Hevra, but I've been let down quite a bit on the last 3 my local ones. So I'd be interested to know what people's experience are there. So I wouldn't necessarily just worry about Hevra network, but just find a good garage. So I found a friend who more than happy to work on the issues on my car, which is any pads, discs, suspension mounts, which is the Tesla thing. Well, not so much the brakes, but the bushes, which is it's just a mechanical thing. It's not necessarily anything electrical. So just make sure you buy a reliable electric car. Focus on the ones that have the best reputation. Arguably, Dub City Big Ballers, nice name. Great stuff. Is it worth buying a Tesla Model 3 Performance from an auction buying service? It's just risk, isn't it? Buying any car from auction is just going to increase the risk. I would say you might be better off trying to buy one privately, but just make sure you do all the relevant checks. Again, I've got a Tesla Model 3 video which talks about all the particular checks to do.
And actually, even people in main dealers can get caught out. If you watch, there's a video from someone I know called EV Nick, where he bought a nearly new from auction, a Kia EV6 GT and stuff, which didn't have what he did the checks, didn't have the disclosures, looked into it a bit more, because there's that site that says previously crashed and it shows the pictures and stuff. Someone logged on and reported him as selling a dodgy car, and that was the first he actually knew about. So actually, if you want to look at the pitfalls of buying from the auctions, it's worth watching his video to see, even someone who's a professional in the motor trade can get caught out, with a color change, because the history isn't always recorded as accurately as it should be.
But the horror story that I always remember when I used to buy cars for a living from a main dealer group is I bought an Audi TT once from a very big auction house, which I'm sure everyone would have heard of. And once the vehicle arrived, they put it up on the ramp and there was a chain holding the engine in. A chain. Yeah, that went straight back. And bear in mind, if you buy a car from auction, it is extremely difficult to get your money back and to send the car back unless you have any kind of clout. So it is a risky business, and it was very risky of me to buy one out of auction. But bear in mind, I know what the pitfalls are. I've bought thousands of cars out of auction before, so it's just knowing what you're getting yourself into. I would suggest. I'm more than happy to help. Drop me a message. Sorry, Alex, you were going to say something.
I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh yeah, that was it. It's the whole clear history thing just means, in some cases, means that whether the accident's been recorded, you can have a nearly new car that has quite a serious shunt. It'll come back as HPI cleared because it's just been repaired on insurance, and you can also have the same car that's, say, 6 or 7 years old that would have the same amount of damage and would be recorded as a write-off. So a clear HPI doesn't, HPI clear and all this sort of stuff doesn't necessarily mean that it hasn't ever had an accident. It just means it's never been written off. So yeah, do your homework, get a check if you're buying something nearly new, and don't just do the surface level stuff on it. Absolutely. And the thing is, with auctions now, it's all online, so you can't physically see the car. So ideally, you'd want to see the car. You want to open the bonnet. You want to have a look at both inner wings to see if the bolts have been moved around. You want to have a look inside the doors. You want to have a look at the color matches. All these things, not buy one in the dark when it's raining off someone dodgy from the pub, for example. Lewis Standing has put 68 kilowatt hours net in a Kona. There we go. Stand corrected, like the man in the orthopedic shoes. We've got, I don't think you've popped a message in here, Hyatt296. Thanks for popping it in. Talking of paid
per mile for work. How long until the government reduces the max 45 pence per mile? I only get 25p, annoyingly. But I
that's
don't know.
after, yeah, because the 45 pence a mile is for the first 10,000 miles.
Yeah.
And then it goes to 25 pence a mile. But that's not, people always mistake that. That's not just the fuel element. That's why it's for, because loads of people thought it didn't apply to EVs, but it applies. The 45 pence HMRC rate is all cars. So it's, the thing is, it's because it's basically to cover like your insurance and all those costs that go towards a car. So effectively, this is why in the fleet world, it's known as grey fleet. And it's a bit of a nightmare because effectively by paying 45 pence a mile, you're effectively renting your member of staff's car off them. So you're not completely in the clear if they've got an issue with their car and you haven't done your due diligence to make sure you've done everything in your power to make sure their car's roadworthy. So bit of a grey area, that.
Roland, yes, we're still running 2 streams, the portrait and the landscape. I haven't worked out whether they're coming up because when I click on the comment, it's coming up on both my feeds. So sorry if that's not coming up on yours. IIRC, it changed since 2011, apparently. Lewis has just popped in. What checks would you do on an insurance declared Cat S declared car? Just seen an Ioniq 6 with 4,000 miles on it for 17k. Tempted. I wouldn't touch it with the barge pole, mate. Personally.
That new, I think I'd be wary about going for a category car as well. If only because I think you'd struggle to sell it on afterwards. It depends with really old stuff. When you're getting down to the Bangonomics stuff, I mean, you can have. I know somebody had a car that was category D for having a mirror knocked off and stuff like that because they just don't want to repair it. The other thing that's worth, although caveat on that, there are a lot of cars being written off at the moment, not because of the level of damage, but because of the cost of the repair process. Now, that doesn't just involve repairing a vehicle. It involves putting that person into a courtesy car and all sorts of other bits and pieces. We had a few years where vehicles have been quite hard to get hold of. So rental vehicles, the rental costs have been going up. The cost, of heating and repairing, the cost of running a workshop, labor costs and your energy costs and everything have gone up. So the cost of repairing a car has gone up quite significantly over the last few years. So there are vehicles being written off, not because they're unsafe or because they're heavily damaged, but because the cost of the repair is unattractive and unfeasible for the insurer. I would say that if you are going to go for it, accept that you're probably going to struggle to sell it when you do come to the end of the time with it or run it into the ground. But I would get someone to go around it and properly check and make sure, find out exactly what's the damage that's happened to it and get it properly checked over in terms of, quality of repairs and stuff.
Yeah, and there are sites where you can, in those ones, a lot of sites now where you can see the before and after pics. So there's some which now have, when it comes in for that, they log all the pictures so you can see the actual damage it had. I mean, this is how
Cat S on a 4K mile car is going to be quite significant damage, I would have thought, though. So, I mean, yeah, I would be wary about it.
No, absolutely. Guys, I think we've kind of run out of time. So we're going to, I think, unless anything else comes up that we need to talk about, we'll hit the how to decide and choose the right electric car for next week. And I'll change that in the title. But I think we've had a really good session, and thanks everyone for pitching in. Was there anything that we missed? I didn't see any comments in there. Pretty sure. Kevin, what's the site that you mentioned there?
I can't remember. Isn't one of the ones like Car Vertical does it? I think
yeah,
there's a few
yeah.
There's a few that you could. They're all subscription, unfortunately, though, so you do have to pay to do that. But there are, if you happen to know a friendly car dealer, they might have a subscription that they'll be able to go through on it.
What a good summary there. And EV's right for you if you want the world to fight less for oil. They'll just fight over other things, unfortunately. Probably materials. But I think let's call it a day there. But thanks everyone for chipping in, commenting. If you haven't watched the EV quiz from last week, we had a great time. So make sure you check it out. And I've just put out a video about an EV meet, which is quite interesting. We had a massive, like 30 plus cars come to Caffeine and Machine first of the year. So go and check out that video if you haven't already. But we'll see you next week, same time. And if you've missed it before, the early part, just go back and watch it. It's on Spotify as well as X. Thanks, everyone. And Alex and Kev, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye.